Welcome back to another episode of Combating Cancer. My name is Gwen Kelly, and I'm so glad that you guys tuned in to listen to me talk on another Wednesday. A little bit of background information about me is that I was diagnosed at 19 with stage 3 astrocytoma brain cancer. And I originally created this platform for people that were either going through active treatment, remission, or have lost a loved one to cancer to come on, talk about their experiences, and just share more insight about cancer and how terrible of a disease it is. Today I have Anthony Pecorella on. Hi, Anthony. How are you?
Good, Gwen. How are you?
Good. I'm glad we connected via Instagram, the world of social media nowadays.
Yeah, thanks to Jess. Jess put this all together.
Yeah, she did. Jesse Koford and I actually went to college together. Small world, but it was good that we connected.
I'm so happy to be here.
Why don't you tell people about yourself?
I'm Anthony Pecorella. I'm a Burkitt lymphoma survivor. So Burkitt lymphoma is a rare and aggressive form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's indigenous to the region of Africa. When I was first diagnosed, the first question they asked is, when was the last time you were in Africa? I said, I'd never been to Africa. They said, well, then we have no idea how you got this. And that's how my cancer journey started. And I said, great, already rolling on the good side of things. I've only ever met one other person that's ever had Burkitt lymphoma. Do you know the comedian Nick Kroll?
Yes, I do.
So it's his sister. I was giving a speech for a nonprofit I work for called Team Impact. We pair kids with serious illness and disabilities with college sports teams. And I had the privilege of speaking at an event in New York, and she happened to be there. I went up and gave the speech, and she came up after and introduced herself. She said that she was also a Burkitt lymphoma survivor, and both had the same, have you been to Africa in the last 6 months question. And we kind of just rolled from there as far as sharing stories. And I always like to say, when you talk to someone who's gone through chemo, it's literally like trading war stories. I wouldn't compare chemo to going to war because I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. Chemo, obviously, as you know, not the most fun of experiences, but I'm blessed by God to be sitting here and sharing my story today.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny when you bring that up, swapping war stories. I always say it's like you make a new best friend wherever you go.
Instantly, instantly.
It's like, "Oh, yeah, I went through that too. Oh, so did you." It doesn't matter what age it is, you just have this strong connection.
As different as everyone's body responds to chemo, it's all relatively the same. So whether it's losing your hair, your skin going pale, feeling sick, like everything is around the same area, I guess you could say. It's just everyone has a different tidbit to their experience. Like with mine, the first 2 rounds I was in chemo, I felt fine. It was one of those things where, like, when's this going to happen? All you hear is about how sick you feel. It didn't hit me the first 2 rounds. And then the last 2 rounds, they added a drug to my regimen called cyclophosphamide. See, I sound smart when I say that. And it just knocked me on my butt. The only thing I could consume those 5 to 6 days I was in the hospital for each round was ginger ale and Uncrustables,
Oh,
but
gee.
only grape jelly. Strawberry jelly would set me off. It had to be grape jelly and Uncrustables. It was absurd. People always say when you have chemo, it's similar to when you're pregnant as far as, like, you have these weird cravings or only certain things sit well, but then you get into it. I never would have thought that for 5, 6 days, I'd only eat Uncrustables and drink ginger ale.
So funny, because
Yeah.
all I wanted was Jimmy John's. So do you still eat the Uncrustables or
Oh,
you
without a doubt. It's funny enough. So I've been blessed since I've rang the bell and moved on with my life, even though cancer will ever be a huge part of my life. I left my phone number at my oncologist's office and said, if any boy between the age of 18 to 25 ever comes through, feel free to share my number. I think I've had the chance to talk with 3 or 4 young men. And one of the young men I just recently talked to said he didn't want to eat anything that he liked because he didn't want to associate it with chemo. And I said, why? He goes, well, I don't want to eat something and feel sick. And then my body's going to think that was it. To this day, I still eat Uncrustables like there's no tomorrow. They're too easy and too good of a snack to not enjoy. In fact, whenever I go back for scans, I always get a ginger ale and an Uncrustable when I'm there. It's tradition now.
Yeah, no, I remember there wasn't foods that I hated during chemo and radiation, but there was one specific smell. I remember I was maybe 8 months into chemotherapy because I did it for a year,
Mhm.
all pill form, so I was able to do it at home, which was really nice. I didn't have to do a port, but my mom was cooking Brussels sprouts, and that
Oh,
ruined
yeah.
the entire house. Remember I came upstairs and I was like, "What are you doing?"
Brussels sprouts on a good day, even if now chemo, it could set off the wrong person.
Yeah, I felt so bad because then going forward, after I went off at her, she was like, "Is it okay if I make this? How are the smells?" I was like, "Oh no, poor mother. I traumatized her over Brussels sprouts."
But to that point about parents, I always say it's harder on them than it ever is on us because they would do anything to take it away from us. I'll never forget when I was first diagnosed, I was in the room with my mom and my dad was going to come with us, but he said, "Do you want me to come?" Because he works in Manhattan. And I said, "We'll be fine. No big deal." At this point in my journey, cancer was never something that entered my mind. But obviously, I've learned now, almost 2 years later, that that was on my parents' mind. And that's why my dad was hell bent on coming to that appointment, just because, God forbid, I did get diagnosed with it. But I just kind of was like, no, no, go to work. But to back up and kind of get into my story, it was Mother's Day 2023. I was at my twin sister Alessia's college graduation weekend. She went to Catholic University. She graduated a week before I did. As you know, graduation festivities from Wednesday all the way up into graduation day on Saturday. So then Sunday was Mother's Day. So my mom stuck around. My dad, we all went out for brunch or something that morning. When I first woke up that morning, I looked in the mirror. I was yawning and I had a golf ball sized tonsil in the back of my throat. So I'm a college kid, and the first thing I think was, what did I drink last night? Well, what did I do? So I showed my mom, and she's like, what is that? I don't know. It's why I asked you. We kind of just said whatever. Like we were just so hell bent on getting my sister packed up and moved out, then going to my graduation the following week, then finishing that, packing up and getting back home. Really didn't think anything of it. So I graduated the following week from the University of Maryland, packed up my stuff that day and drove home because I was already transferring to Stony Brook University on Long Island to finish out my college football career and get my MBA. So I came home. So as everyone knows that before you play college sports, you have to get your annual physical. So I went to my pediatrician office that I've been going to for the last 22 years of my life. And my pediatrician I usually see, she wasn't available, but I thought I was healthy. So I just said, whoever's available, let me see them just so they can kind of give me a check and I'll be on my way. And I saw this doctor and they performed the physical. The last thing they do is look in your throat. He goes, does that bother you? I said, no. He's okay. Don't worry about it. 22, just trying to go play college football. So I was like, okay. And it was the first time I'd ever gone to a doctor's appointment. I know 22, crazy first time at a doctor's appointment by yourself. But it was always me and my sister. It was like our thing, whatever. But I was like, no, Ma, I can go by myself. So I went, that whole thing happened. So I come home and my mom goes, what did he say? And I'm like, oh, he said, no problem, no big deal. We're good. For all the mothers out there listening to this, obviously that wasn't a good enough answer for her. So a week later, she has me back at the pediatrician office with her there and seeing my actual pediatrician. She looks in the back of my throat and freaks out. She tests me for everything under the sun. She goes, there's no way it looked like this a week ago. She sends me to a specialist. And the first specialist we saw looked at it and goes, I don't know what that is. Come back in a month and I'll reevaluate. Within that month, I started chemo.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Thank God I was home. This is like the craziest part of the story, in my opinion. Imagine if I transferred to any other school in the country than the only place on Long Island where you could play Division I college football. So we go back to see my pediatrician and she tells me, well, you had mono 6 weeks prior. I never had any symptoms, never felt sick, never had any problems. But my mom goes, all right, well, we need to see a specialist because obviously there's something wrong. So she sends me to this small office, this guy, Dr. Connie, who quite literally saved my life. We go in to see him. We run through the whole story of where we've been with everything. And he takes one look at it and he goes, let me take a needle biopsy of my lymph node here. And he swabs the tonsil, sends it off, comes back and it's clean. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, we're good. And he goes, I won't really know unless we take it out. It was the last thing I wanted to do because it was late July. Training camp was approaching. It was my first one in Stony Brook. Again, it's all I'm focused on right now. And he goes, we'll take it out on July 20th. It takes about a week to recover, and then you'll be fine. I said, okay. So I went to my head coach at Stony Brook at the time, Chuck Piori, and I said, hey, I'm going to miss the first 2 days of training camp because I'm getting this tonsil out. He goes, no problem. I said, okay. Because at this point, I was just coming off playing at Maryland for the last 4 years. seasoned vet. They were just more worried about me being ready for week one. So July 20th, he takes the tonsil out and he told us, regardless if it was good or bad news, he would call us into his office and tell us. So 6 days later, July 26th, he calls and says, I got the results in, come on in. Now we're back to where I was. I had no thought of this being cancer. None. As I said, since learned my parents did. But to me, I was just like, oh, bad reaction to mono, just some rare thing, whatever. Again, it hasn't entered my mind. So we go into his office, and not only are we in his doctor's office, but he took us to his actual physical office. Like we're not in a patient room. He puts his paper down and he goes, I have good news and I have bad news. So obviously you say, okay, I'll take the bad news first, thinking that the good news will pull it out of the good news. He goes, you have lymphoma. So obviously to people who have had cancer in their life, understand what lymphoma is. I wasn't very familiar. I knew it was a type of cancer, but when he first said lymphoma, cancer wasn't the first word that entered my mind. It kind of took me a second to process. So I'm sitting there, I'm not looking at my mom or my doctor. I'm looking at the windows. I'm looking out the parking lot. I'm like, that's kind of crazy. It wasn't setting in yet. Then it slowly started to set in. And I was like, oh, crap. So then I turned, I go, what could possibly be the good news? And he said, well, if you went to a grocery store and you had an aisle full of cancer and you got to pick which one, this is the one you wanted because you're healthy, you're young, and you're going to beat it. I go, well, thank you, Jesus. We're all like, thank God. I'm kind of a wise ass. But back to our conversation about our parents, the first person I look at is my mom, and I'm petrified for her because it's my mom and dad, me and my sister. It's the four of us. We've been tight knit, packed since the day me and my sister were born. And her only son just got diagnosed with lymphoma at the age of 22, a healthy young kid. I don't smoke. I'm not a big partier. Like, let's hold 9 yards. And she just found out her son has cancer. So I'm grabbing her hand, both bracing it. And I know that the next word out of my mouth will forever be etched in both my mind, my mom's mind, and the doctor's mind. And I turn to him, I go, I have practice on Tuesday. Do you think I can go? He sat back in his chair. He goes, I don't think you fully comprehend what I just told you. I'll never forget. He goes, I'm not going to tell you no, but take a moment and just let it set in. So my mom, being the actionary person, goes, what do we do next? And he said, well, you have to find an oncologist to make sure that you genuinely like this person. This isn't a doctor where you could half-ass your picking. Like whoever you're picking, you're almost marrying because you're literally handing your life in their hands. And so we got in the car. And the first person we called was my dad, who happened to be at St. Patrick's Cathedral because he went and said a prayer. God forbid the worst happened. So my mom and I are crying. And my dad's always been the steady hand of our family. Never really been like the emotional type. He just said, we're going to get through this. Just take it one day at a time. And that became kind of our motto with the one day at a time. Connie also said the last thing he told us when we walked out of the office that this is just going to be a bump in the road. So now you go and you look for your oncologist. Really don't know where to start. There's no book on it, but you're in New York. Where do you go? You go to Sloan Kettering because they're the premier cancer center. We met with a doctor via Zoom and we talked to him and he kind of laid out his idea of what he wanted to do for me for treatment wise. Meanwhile, my dad, that night I was diagnosed, called a friend of his, Dr. Robert Min, who's the head of all physicians. Talk about who you know. He's the head of all physicians at Weill Cornell, New York Presbyterian. They went to high school together.
Yep. Well, it's one of the things when you get diagnosed, it's not about what you know, it's who you know. Because, like you said, where your dad's all action, that's the exact same way my dad was too. He was like, I don't care. I'm finding the best of the best. He was hounding doctors day and night. Like my poor oncologist, Dr. Bendel, worst decision she ever did was giving her.
Remember?
Yeah, worst decision. He was constantly blowing up her phone like all hours of the night. Was like, hey, I found this study that might help. And she's like, hey, this doesn't even fit into Gwen's category.
And that's why she's the doctor. So he called him Dr. Min. And so then Dr. Min called the head of oncology at Weill Cornell. And he said, if you had a 22-year-old boy who was just diagnosed with lymphoma, who would you bring him to? He said, a woman named Dr. Lisa Roth. I was diagnosed on a Wednesday. By that Friday, we had a Zoom consultation with Dr. Roth and our nurse practitioner, Mindy Jaffe. I'll never forget that we were on the phone for 45 minutes, just talking it over. She was looking at the reports from the biopsy. And that was the first time that Burkitt lymphoma came up. And I'm thinking, like, what the hell is Burkitt lymphoma? So that's the whole question. Have you been in Africa in the last 6 months? So we go through this whole phone call. And again, Dr. Roth goes, this is just going to be a bump in the road. And my mom, like, she still gets, I get chills even today when you hear that, because Connie and her have no sort of any correlation. And yet they both said the same quote verbatim. And I'll never forget, we hung up that phone call, and me and my mom, my dad, and my sister all sat together. And obviously it was my choice and my life was in her hands, but we were all in agreement that I was going to go get treated at Cornell by Dr. Lisa Roth. What I'll say is that Sloan and Cornell are across the street from each other. Everyone at Cornell trains at Sloan and vice versa. So as much as it's different, it's the same, but just to make a point. A couple of days later, I went in to see Dr. Roth for the first time in person. And so they have to sit down with your parents and they kick them out of the room. And then, they ask you all the questions and they get a basis of what your livelihood is. Me, Dr. Roth, and Mindy learned that we all kind of saw things the same way. So I knew that I could be my wise ass self around them and joke around. But it took a few minutes because I didn't know if they were all going to be very buttoned up. And
Yeah, you have to like gauge the room.
yeah. So at the end of that meeting, they gave me a choice if I wanted to be treated on the adult floor or the pediatric floor. And I asked, well, what's the difference? I'm thinking, oh, like as hard as it is down here on the adult floor, watching kids go through chemo has to be the hardest gut wrenching thing to watch. And they said, well, it's a lot prettier up on the kids' floor. It's for kids. Obviously, adults kind of know what they're going through, so they don't really have to smoke and mirror it. But for the kids, they can. And at the time, I was 22 in 1 month when I got diagnosed. And I think the cutoff is 21. So they made a special exemption for me on top of the fact that pediatric chemo is actually stronger than adult chemo. With the type of chemo I had, with how aggressive it was, they said, we recommend that you do the pediatric floor. And we want you to do 4 to 6 rounds, 5 to 6 days each round. I go, 5 to 6 days of what? I go, of chemo. I go, I have to live here for 5 to 6 days? They go, yeah. So now I'm thinking, I'm more worried about, I've never spent the night in the hospital. What's that going to be like? So your mind just starts freaking out about everything that could possibly go wrong.
But did you have a Wii there on the floor that you could at least play with?
So I'll get to that. That's the best story. I ultimately decided that I was going to do the pediatric floor. They get you set up with a port and they give you the baby dose of chemo. And funny enough, as much as I'm a talker when I'm not on stuff to make you go to sleep when they perform surgeries, I'm very, very talkative when I go under. And when they put my port in, I obviously wasn't very coherent when this all happened. The doctor who performed the surgery, this guy, Dr. Pick, brought me back in and I asked him where he was from. And he goes, oh, I'm from Philadelphia. I turned to my mom and go, thank God I didn't know that before the surgery. I would have been freaking out. Just a little fun tidbit. But fast forward, I'm checking in for my first day of real chemo in the hospital. I'm getting in my room, sit on my bed, figure out how the TV works, and I have a knock on my door. So I turn around and there's this 4-year-old girl standing, I don't know, 3 feet tall. She goes, who are you? I'm like sitting there like, oh, how cute. I go, I'm Anthony. It's nice to meet you. And she goes, I'm Ellie. I'm the boss of this floor. You need anything, you come find me. Her whole care team was standing behind her, straight face, like dead serious. Like this was her floor. I was just happy to be a part of it. And I was like, I understand. So that day, I go to try to go into this playroom. Every kid there is 4, 5, 6 years old, 12, maybe even 12, 13. But I'm the oldest by a long shot. I tried to go in there and she goes, no, Ellie, this is too old to be in here. You can't come in. So then I would actually bring my own PlayStation with me to the hospital. So I go through the first day of chemo, and that night was my first night in the hospital. I was petrified. I didn't think I was gonna be able to sleep. My mom bought me a night mask because, as people know who stay in a hospital, that they come in and do vitals at 3 o'clock, at 5 o'clock, at 8 o'clock. So you don't really get much sleep. So at least wearing the eye mask helps a little bit. So I'm getting all ready in bed, and my nurse, Amanda, who ended up being my majority of the time day nurse throughout my chemo, had left. So I just made a good relationship with her, and I'm thinking like, oh, I got to make another good relationship now with my night nurse. In walked this woman, Courtney, who I love to death, from Staten Island. I think she had just gotten married at the time to her wife, but both at like important stages of her life. And she walked in, she was a college athlete as well. And we just hit it off from the start. and she was more of your tough love type. And so my mom originally that night, I had told her, go home. I don't want you staying here because I want you to get away from this. But she saw how nervous I was to stay there, that she was ready to settle in. But when Courtney walked in, that put her at ease. So let's say I spent 30 plus nights in the hospital over my entire chemo regimen. She was probably my night nurse 22, 23 of those 30 nights. Like whenever Courtney came in and I was there, the running joke was, oh, your boyfriend's here kind of thing. And we would just every night, because the kids, we were on a pediatric floor, the kids are in bed 6:30, 7 o'clock. All the parents that weren't staying would leave. So I would be up all night talking with Courtney just about our life and what was going on. But I will forever cherish those conversations. I will say the women on 6 North, the nurses, they are angels on earth. Amanda, Courtney, Dana, Diana, who I miss. I can't miss anybody because I'm going to get beat up. Taylor. And then there's Dr. Chow, Anne Marie. I'm going to probably forget somebody. I'm going to get beat up for it. But that's just like inpatient. Then with outpatient, there was Gina, Amanda, Kerman. There's just so many women that have played such a role in such a short period of my life, but I'll forever cherish. But kind of getting back on track of my story, when I would go in for chemo, Ellie would be there too. So I would be spending not a lot of time with her, but those first 2 rounds, I was just trying to get a sense of why she was there. And I knew she was there for cancer because we both had the same port with the IV pole. So Ellie had already beaten cancer by the age of 2. She was diagnosed at the age of 1, beat at the age of 2, and then at the age of 3, she relapsed. So she was there for her second trip with cancer. I was going with my first. So she was the quote unquote pro and I was the rookie. So when I was going through chemo, it always lined up that Ellie and I would be kind of the same time. And so part of my daily regimen, my dad would make me walk around the hospital floor, just trying to stay in somewhat shape. 'Cause you can't really lift, you can't really run. So we would just walk around the hospital floor and 20 laps would be a mile. So we would go out and probably 10 or 11 laps in, Ellie would come out of her room. She had this little car when you like pedal with your feet on the ground. She'd
Yeah.
come out in this car. Her mom would be chasing her with the IV pole, trying to keep up. And she'd come out and play bumper cars with our IV poles. It'd be a straight shot from her room across the floor to hit me. And she would do it every day. And it would send the nurses on the floor into a complete frenzy. But it was our thing and it worked. It stuck. So I go through chemo and I'll never forget the last round I was going through. It was probably like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. And with Ellie's regimen, I think it was her radiation that didn't allow her to eat past a certain time. And she was literally sitting in the hallway and she's banging her head against the walls. And her mom's sitting there next to her, just so defeated. They didn't know what to do. And she was waiting by the door for her dad because her dad would work all day and then at night would come and see her. And so my mom and dad were leaving. And my mom said to Ellie, oh, when I come back tomorrow, do you want me to bring you a surprise? And Ellie goes, yeah. She goes, anything specific? She goes, surprise me. This girl's 4, by the way.
Sounds like a little firecracker.
So my mom comes back the next day and she had got something from the gift store and it was this pink unicorn in a brown bag. She gives Ellie a gift, she goes, check it on me. Later in the day, we see Ellie running around the floor, still holding the bag. And she thinks the brown bag was the gift. This is how sweet this girl was. And my mom goes, Ellie, the gift's in the bag. And she pulls out the pink unicorn. And what does she have on her shirt is a pink unicorn.
Oh my gosh.
And that became her toy. And so then fast forward, I finished chemo. I rang the bell on November 29th, 2023. Ellie, her mom, and her dad were there. Not purposely because I was ringing the bell that day, but just it lined up that they were there
Mhm.
for chemo. Everyone listen when I say outpatient, inpatient. So outpatient on the 6th floor, you get off the elevator, you make a right. That's where I would see Dr. Roth, Mindy, Gina, and all those nurses. That's where I would go in the beginning of the process. And then every time I'd come in for a checkup in between rounds of chemo, I would go there. So that's why I built such a good relationship with the nurses in there and other nurse practitioners, Mindy, Hannah, stuff like that. Annette, that's that. See, I knew I was going to forget one.
Shout out Annette.
So then an inpatient would be what they call 6 North, and that's where Courtney, Amanda, and those nurses were. So when you rang the bell, you do it in the inpatient. I got to ring the bell. I cried. Everybody cried. Ellie wanted to take a picture with me after. So that's the picture I have on my phone. And part of my screensaver of us taking a picture together. So then that was, I guess, not the end of my cancer journey, but they ring the bell. And everyone that knows once you ring the bell, there's a lot that goes on after the bell, beyond the bell, as they say. But I kind of was focusing on getting back into my life and getting ready to play college football again. I had gotten a text from one of my nurses because obviously I'd gotten everyone's number because I just was so emphatic with their life, how old their kids were, what was new, what they were doing. That's what got me through chemo. So I kept up with them. I'll never forget one of the nurses reached out and said that Ellie's family had started a GoFundMe. Everyone knows that's gone through chemo. It's not a cheap experience whatsoever. And the costs quickly add up. And so I think it was Ellie's aunt had started a GoFundMe, and Gina shared it with me, and she said, I don't know how much you could do with this, but just thought you should know. And I took that and made it my life's work because, as everyone knows, when you go through chemo, everybody wants to help. Everybody wants to play a role. So I always tell people whenever ask me, whoever go through chemo after I have, you got to give everybody a job because everyone wants to feel a part of it. And so I felt with Ellie's treatment, I wanted to play a role. So I did everything I could to help her raise money. And we ended up raising, I think, 35 or $36,000 in 2 or 3 months span.
Oh, that's amazing.
Her parents were so thankful. Ellie unfortunately passed away in April of 2024, April 19th, April 20th, April 19th, one of those days. And I was actually on my way up, as we were talking about before, I was on my way to Boston to give my second public speaking appearance for the nonprofit I work for, Team Impact. I was going to speak at Gala. And on the drive up, I got a call from my nurse, Courtney, and she said, did you hear about Ellie? And I said, no, that she said she had passed away. I felt worse in that moment than when I got diagnosed because it's just not only did my heart break for her, but for her family, for her nurses, for her doctors. It was just a gut wrenching message, but I knew that Ellie wouldn't want me to sit and pout because her motto, as I've kind of picked up, and a lot of people, if you find my social, everything is just keep swimming. And that was Ellie's motto through chemo, was just keep swimming. So I kind of adopted it from her. And that's how I keep her story alive through my own, is the whole JKS motto. And I'm sorry to everyone listening, it's a little dark, but we went to Ellie's service and I really wanted to pay my respects because I hadn't seen Ellie since December of 23 because I'd gone back for a checkup right after I had finished getting my port out and everything. And even to this day, when I go back for a checkup, I always poke my head in 6 North just to say hi to the nurses and doctors there. And Ellie was there with her mom. And it was the first time that Ellie had ever allowed me to even sniff the playroom, to the point where I stepped in the door frame and she started crying. I stepped back outside and she all of a sudden was good. She gave me this googly eye ring that I still have. And I'll kind of get into more of what else I have from Ellie's family I still hold close to my heart. And I didn't know it'd be the last time I ever saw her. So when she passed, I really wanted to go and pay my respects. And so when I went, all my nurses were there. It was the first time I had seen them since I rang the bell. It was a really emotional experience. But as I was leaving, I think it was her uncle that pulled me aside and just said how appreciative he was and how the family was of everything we did for Ellie with the raising of the money. And it just meant so much to me that I was able to play a small part in helping Ellie's family. To this day, we still call each other family. We still keep in touch. In fact, when I was going through chemo, they told me we want to come to a game that like the upcoming season. And it's one of those things you think like, oh, like, yeah, great. I really appreciate that. But you don't really think,
Like an empty promise, yeah.
yeah. So this is late September 2024, and we're playing Morgan State. It's a rainy, cold, crappy day. My parents had season tickets, so I always knew where they were. I look up and I didn't see them, and I'm looking down the row and I find my family, and they're all pointing back towards their seats. And I look up and it's Ellie's dad, Ellie's mom, 2 of her brothers, and her sister. We were just about to play a football game, and I'm in tears on the sideline. So the game goes on. We could have won or lost. It really wouldn't have mattered. I feel like I'd won before the game even started, but we did win. And I had gone to the locker room. I was taking a shower, and my parents were telling Ellie's parents, oh, don't wait for Anthony. He always takes long. You guys got to get back to Brooklyn. I'm sure you don't want to stick around. And we're all wet. And they're like, no, we came here to see Anthony. We're going to stay and see Anthony. So I came out, gave them all big hugs, and we were chatting it up. And so then Ellie's mom goes, we have something for you. I'm thinking like a t-shirt. Like, I don't know what. the pink unicorn. And on the pink unicorn was a pinned picture of Ellie and then a bracelet that said JKS on it. And she gave that to me. It literally could have brought me to my knees of how this shared emotion we had in that moment. Her mom and I gave each other a huge hug, and it still gives me chills thinking of that moment. We were a part of each other's lives for such a short time, and we'll forever be connected because of it, because of a little 4-year-old girl. And it just meant so much to me that they were there. And it means so much to me that we still keep in touch. It's terrible of what brought us together, but I could have never imagined my life now and who I am as a person today had I not have met Ellie or her family. Whenever I tell my story, I always end up going on a tangent about Ellie because she played such a crucial role in not only my cancer journey, but my life. And I made a promise to her family that whenever I get the chance to tell my story, I'm going to tell Ellie's because everyone deserves to know how special of a young lady she was. She is, for that matter, because she always seems to show up every now and again. But she just means so much to me that I would be remiss if I didn't kind of just spend the last, I don't know, 35 minutes talking about her for years.
That's absolutely amazing. When you said that she gave the pink unicorn, I swear I immediately had tears well to my eyes, and I'm like, "Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry." That's so amazing. That's important that you're able to still talk about her because, when you meet people going through this journey, they impact you so much, whether it's the nurses or Ellie who you're with on the floor, it stays with you.
Mhm.
And it's crazy. You gain all of these experiences. When you get diagnosed with cancer, you're fighting for your life. But when you meet all those amazing people around you, you kind of take a step back and you're like, I don't know how I did it without them.
It's funny you say that. People ask me all the time when I go back to the hospital, do I have PTSD? Do I freak out? And I say, you know what? I'm always stoked. I mean, obviously not why I'm there, but because of the people I get to see when I go there. I'll tell you a funny story to kind of break it up. Did you ever have to do a spinal tap?
No, I didn't. Thank goodness.
I had to do 4 rounds. You had to do it every round before you went in after. So I guess I had 8. No, I had 9. For anyone that's listening that doesn't know what a spinal tap it is, they quite literally take a needle and they put it into your spine. They have to find like a sack of fluid in your spine that they remove and then re-infuse with chemo. The first time I did it was when they did the bone marrow graft. I was under, so I didn't really know what it felt like. The preceding times, I had to do it before every round of chemo and after every round of chemo. And Dr. Roth gave me the option of you could do it awake, we could put you to sleep, or we could do a local type of numbing. And I said to her, I'm going to be doing this a lot. I really don't want to go on there every time. Let's try the local and we'll see. So the first time we did it, it was a one shot and done. But I will say it's a very weird experience. So my grandmother always used to say when she'd have a drink, she'd go, oh, it goes right to my legs. It goes right to my legs. When they infuse that chemo in your spine, it quite literally feels like it's running down your leg. It's one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had. Fast forward, I think it was the second round, and Dr. Roth was performing the spinal tap. And so a lot of times you don't get it on the first shot. It takes like 2 or 3 because you're trying to find the sac. So she put the needle in. I said, you got it. And she goes, no, I didn't. She goes, how can you tell? I go, oh, I feel the needle in the, you got it. She goes, no, I don't. I go, okay, then prove me wrong. She goes, okay. She pulls the needle back and the fluid came out. She goes, holy crap. Now to everyone on the floor, Dr. Roth is a big shot. So everyone, when they're around, they're usually fairly buttoned up. And it was the first time where the patient had gotten her to express some sort of emotion that wasn't professional.
Mhm.
Everyone in the room didn't know how to respond. And that's kind of where Dr. Roth and I's relationship became so tight because we were able to be very relaxed and normal around each other.
I was
And
probably like the
even
talk of the conference room or break room that day.
so it's funny you should say that. 5 days later, I go for my next spinal tap. It was as if there was a performance going on. They had a viewing room. Everyone wanted to see me predict it. And I ended up doing it again. And it became like a running joke for the rest of our spinal taps that I had like this sixth sense for a needle in my back. But yeah, that's a cool story. Another cool story is an opportunity that I got to do. It was March of 24. I got a phone call from a marketing team at Cornell, and they asked if I wanted to throw out a first pitch at a New York Met game. I said yes before he could even finish his question. So then fast forward to July, I got to throw out a first pitch at a Met game to Dr. Roth. And so Dr. Roth isn't the most athletic person on the planet. She stands about 5 feet tall, 100 pounds, soaking wet, like just not really the athletic type, I'd say. But she's so sweet that she found somebody in her neighborhood that played college baseball. and worked with him. She'd go save lives all day, come home, and then she has 2 kids of her own, and she'd put aside time to work with this guy so that when I threw the pitch, she would catch it. It just speaks volumes to the type of person she is. That day was so surreal because it was the first time I got to experience Dr. Roth, Mindy, Courtney, Amanda, Gina, Dr. Rosenwig, and Hannah outside of a hospital environment, just as like a normal self. And Cornell was kind enough that they had us set up in a suite. I had friends and family there. It was such a perfect day. It's one of those core memories that I'll hold forever. But that and the Spinal Tap story, usually my favorite stories to tell outside of Ellie. It just holds such a special place in my heart.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's gonna sound like really weird. Some of my best memories I had while I was going through quote unquote the worst time period of my life. You know, when you're going through cancer, like you and I talked about this before, that people think your life is over and it's done and you're not gonna find any joy in anything. But just how you yourself talk and this entire time you've had a smile on your face and you light up when you talk about all these different experiences. I feel like you held such a positive attitude throughout the entire thing. Not a lot of people can do that. You really led by example of how you didn't let cancer define you and you really took it one day at a time.
It's always one of those things that you say, oh, it can't be me, can't be me, can't be me. And then it is you and your whole life. You go from being this Big Ten football player, and now your whole life's turned upside down, and now you're that cancer kid. You could hide from it, or you could just say, I'm going to run right through you. And that was my mentality that my family took on with it, the whole bump in the road mentality of it. I'll never forget my nurse practitioner, Mindy, told me, she goes, it's going to go by really fast. It's going to feel like it takes forever, but you'll forever hold in the rest of your life. And when she said that, I was like, what do you say? But thinking back, I was diagnosed in late July, so July 26th. And by November 29th, I was ringing the bell. And here I am 18 months later, still talking about those memories from that experience very vividly. Because although you ring the bell, a lot of people know you're not really out of the woods yet. They always say that first year is the hardest year. Not only are you reacclimating yourself to society, you just went from being told you're diagnosed with cancer and now you're beat cancer. Now you're expected just to pick up where you left off and you're completely different of a person. Not only is it physically taxing, but mentally more so. I was a mental health advocate prior to this experience. When I got sick, I made it almost as if I was taking my own medicine. And I was very vocal about my treatment and how it was affecting my body. I never shied away from what I was experiencing. My whole mentality was if I could help at least one person who's going through not chemo, but maybe just had a rough day at work or going through a tough patch in their relationship, if I could show them that you can go through life's darkest challenges and still see the light of day at the end of it all, then I would feel as if what I was doing was a success. And just helping one person, I didn't go into it, I want to help 1,000 people. And if I did, great. But if I know that I helped at least one, then I know what I did was successful in being vulnerable about what I was going through. A lot of guys like to play the whole macho card and, oh, I don't feel emotions. I'm tough. And I always say being vulnerable is the toughest thing we can do, especially as men, because we've kind of created this ideology as men in the world that we can just man up through our problems, yet 75 to 80% of suicides are men. I just felt as a man, it was manlier, I guess, of me to speak up what I was going through. And I always say, like, just stay on the mental health conversation real quick. It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to do nothing about it. Like sitting there and wallowing and crying, just like with cancer, it's not going to help you. I will tell anybody who's going through cancer right now, get yourself fired up as if it's a game. Put your head down and fight because sitting there and crying about it, and there's hard days. There's definitely days, I'm sure you had them too, where you don't know why me, why this happened to me. But I always say, don't bathe in misery, just dip your toe because the longer you spend there, the worse about yourself you're going to feel. And the more time you spend focusing on having a positive attitude, everything else that you're experiencing is going to feel lesser and lesser. So if there's anyone out there right now, not even just chemo, but going through some hard time, just know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel rather than sitting and crying about it. Find a way to get through it and keep going. Or as Ellie said, just keep swimming.
Just keep swimming. I totally agree with you. And I think one thing to mention is that when you were going through treatment, you were actively posting about it, which is very courageous to do because I know when it was me, I was so fortunate and very blessed to be tolerating treatment the way that I did. Doctors weren't understanding why this was happening. And I was like, yeah, you guys are to help, but God was my everything going through treatment and still is. Like, I give everything that I've done in my life to him. And I remember I had times where I would have people come and be like, hey, we want to interview you and talk about what you're doing. How are you handling this that well? I was at the point in my life that I didn't wanna talk about it. That was, like, so hard for me because I put it to the side and I was like, "Well, it's not really happening. I'm going through treatment," but I would never walk up and be like, "Oh, hi, my name's Gwen and I have stage 3 brain cancer," because I just didn't really know what to do.
Yeah.
And it's just so unbelievably brave of you to be able to do that while you're going through treatment, because even now 2 years removed from myself, I switched my mindset where I was like, "I need to," because at that time when I was 19, I didn't find a page like yours where I could see someone my age was going through that. That would have been so helpful for me at that age to have found that, and it's just so huge that you've been able to do this and have this platform and share your story and especially share Ellie's story as well.
And to your point about God, people always ask, how did you like keep the faith? And I'll admit there's times where I just said, why? Like, why me, God? Why did you put me in this position? What did I do to deserve this? I had a conversation with Ellie's mom after Ellie had passed. And I said, how do you still keep your faith? And she said, because God blessed me with those 4 years. He didn't have to bless me with those 4 years. I've never felt overcome with so much of God's love in that moment. Here this woman was, had just gone through hell, lost her youngest daughter to cancer, and she still had the strength to say that. It's why I'm proud that I wear this bracelet that my whole family has, and it says Romans 12:12, which says, rejoice in hope, patient in tribulation, and constant in prayer. And the crazy thing about that quote, even just 12:12 in general, so when I was a kid, everyone always says you make a wish at 11:11. I've always had this crazy thought, well, if everyone's making their wish at 11:11, I'm going to make mine at 12:12. So when I had gotten sick, my friend Danzan sent me a text, and it was just this quote from the Bible in Romans 12:12 that says, rejoice in hope, patient tribulation, constant prayer. Now, I will admit the first thing I read was 12:12, not the quote, which still stands true. But to everyone out there who maybe is or isn't big into their faith, to whatever it is you do believe in, lean into it in those hard times because it will help you find purpose through it all. I guess that's when I felt like I grew closer to God even during that experience in my darkest hour, which is crazy to say. The more I share my story, the more I share Ellie's story, and the more I get to hear other people's stories like yours, it all kind of makes sense in a way why God put me in that position. I still don't really know why he put me in that position. And maybe one day I'll fully 100% grasp it. But had I never gone through that experience, there's so much I've experienced in the last 18 months that I would not have appreciated anywhere near enough without going through what I went through. It was my worst nightmare. In a way, it was my biggest blessing for what I was able to experience because of it. I literally would not wish chemo on my worst enemy. Getting diagnosed was, in a way, one of my biggest blessings because it opened my eyes to so much more that life has to offer.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's the thing. I remember the first time someone asked me, they were like, "Well, Gwen, if you had to go through it all again, knowing what happened, knowing you had those terrible days where it's like, why me? Why this? You know, feeling sorry for yourself, laying on the bathroom ground sobbing, the throwing up, losing the hair, would you do it again?" And I remember the first time someone asked me that, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Why would you put me in that spot? Obviously, you're going to say no, but the lessons you learned from it, there's nothing you could do to change it now.
Yeah, I was just kind of like, "Okay, that felt a little bit insensitive," and then I took a step back and I was like, "Well, that actually is a good question." I feel like it made me grow so much as a person, and especially, when you get diagnosed, you have to grow up very quickly.
Very,
And
very.
it can be very hard to transition back into normal life, especially at our age, because our friends' issues are nowhere comparable to ours, which can be very difficult to navigate. I don't really care about the gossip anymore. I care more about, okay, are my next scan's gonna come back clean?
When I first got diagnosed and I sat with my family, we were deciding if and how we would tell everybody. I'm always a social media guy. I was going to make a post, but I said, before I do that, I want to tell those who are closest to me, friends and family, what's going on. In some of those phone calls, it was, are you good? Yeah, I'm good. Okay, we're good. But then there's other phone calls where I turned into the person consoling them, yet I was the one that had the bald head, the port sticking out of my chest, the gut wrenching pain in my head, the nausea in my stomach, and the whole 9 yards. but I was the one that had to console them. And it's why I wanted to be the one to tell everybody, because I wanted them to hear it from me that I'm okay, gonna get through it. It's just a bump in the road, but this is what I'm going through. And because I care about you so much and I don't want you finding out from a post about what's going on, that I want to tell you. And so I was thankful that I did that, because in the following days after I post, as you know, you get the people who come out of the woodworks and like, oh, my best friend, I care. As you know, you don't need fake love in the
Yep.
middle of that situation. I just want to make it clear. I'm very, very thankful for the outpouring love and support that I got. When I got diagnosed, throughout treatment, and even today, people who check in on me understand that although I've rang the bell 18 months ago, life doesn't just figure itself out like that. I'll say now that I feel I'm in the best physical and mental shape I've been since chemo. And I thought that I'd bounce back like that, but as you know, it doesn't just happen like that. And that's why I always tell people who go through chemo, like, oh, once you're done, it doesn't just end there. It's gonna take time. You're gonna get back, but it's gonna take a lot of long nights, early mornings. But you're gonna get back, but you just have to have the patience.
Hmm. Well, you're better than me of how you told your friends and family because I texted in a group chat and I said, I have cancer, LOL, and sent it.
Oh, Jesus. It's what we were talking about before. Everyone has their way of doing it, and that's why I always tell people about my journey and what I did. That's not the textbook way of doing things. Everyone figures out what works for them. If that's what works for you, if that was the easiest way on your conscience to do it, then that's how you should do it. That is a funny way of doing it, I will admit. And as we talked about before, my greatest medicine through it all was humor and just joking through it. Like everyone asks, "Oh, how do you feel?" Like, "Oh, yeah, sunshines and rainbows." I always would say sunshines and rainbows. Whether it was true or not, that's what I would say, because I knew if I put them at ease, then I was at ease.
That's funny. Yeah, you focus more about other people than yourself, like,
Mhm,
while you're going through this, and it is crazy the amount of people that come out that you wouldn't even expect it to, but it reminds me of something that my dad used to tell me. We would go to a funeral, and he'd be like, "It's really sad because 'cause you'll show up to the funeral, everyone's crying," and he's like, "Unfortunately, half of the people here won't really think about it in, like, 9 months."
mhm.
And that's what reminds me of when people get diagnosed with cancer and you go through the entire treatment and everything, and they see that you're good and you're done. But living afterwards is very hard. It's just as hard as going through treatment.
You have to figure everything out again.
Yes, you're literally figuring everything out and you're trying to navigate those fears that you didn't think that you were going to have because it's scary living your everyday life. It's crazy to see the people that have continued to stick around for you.
You're real friends. But like we said, wouldn't wish it on anybody. It is an eye-opening experience in so many different ways, including finding out who your real friends are.
Mhm. And like I said, I would do it all over again. Not that I would have a choice to pick not to or not,
Yeah.
but if I had to, I would 100%. Like, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but it really gives you the insight and experience of how beautiful life can actually be. A lot of us take that for granted every single day. It really weeds out who's there for you, who's not, what you should do, what you shouldn't do very quickly. We just learn those things quicker than other people.
It teaches you to stop and smell the roses once in a while.
Something like that, yeah. So after treatment was done and you came back home, how did you go from there? What are you doing right now in your life besides posting everything on social media, big success, mental health awareness? What have you been up to with that?
So this upcoming fall, I'll be enrolling at the University of Maine, playing my 7th year of college football. And hopefully come August 30th will be the first time in over 1,000 plus days that I'll get to play the sport that I love very much. And I'm really looking forward to getting up there in late July. I've really developed a love for public speaking. It's become a passion of mine. If you would have told 5th grade me that public speaking would be a passion of mine, they'd have told you you're crazy. 'Cause when I was in the 5th grade, I think I had to say a poem in front of the class, and I had such stage fright that I ran out of the room crying and I wanted no part of it. And now I get up in front of rooms of thousands of people and I just feed off the energy and I love it because I love sharing my story, but more I love making connections with people like you, like Miss Kroll that I got to meet at the Night of Impact in New York because of the shared experiences we've had. And it's just such a surreal thing. And then my family's doing well. As much as it was a win for me, it was a win for all of us. And it's nice that 18 months later, we get to still do our thing. I mean, obviously, that part of my life will forever be etched in our brains, in our souls, in our heart. But I think that we all feel as if we are better people because of it, because of the experiences we've all shared throughout it. And as close as I've always was, I definitely grew a lot closer with my family throughout that whole process. Because a lot of things happen to your body throughout that whole experience. Obviously, you need to share it with somebody, and you can talk to doctors and nurses, you can talk to your family. So I would talk to both because I'm just a yapper. We definitely grew a lot closer during all that. But yeah, I mean, just football, public speaking of where I've been the last 18 months, just really trying to get back to where I was physically and mentally to set myself up to play the game I love again. It's kind of crazy. I haven't stepped on a football field and played for real since November of 2022. So it's a
Mhm.
whole college experience I've almost missed because of this diagnosis. And I was preparing to go to Stony Brook for a year and then declare for the NFL draft because that's always been a dream of mine. That's always been my goal, and it's what was pushing me through chemo was I want to get back and feel I want to play. And I thought that, oh, once I finish chemo, boom, that next year I'll be back. As we know, it doesn't work that way. And I know that God has a plan for me, and whatever that is, I guess I'll see someday. I just hope I live up to the fullest potential that He has in store for me.
Yeah, as of right now, just keep swimming.
Just keep swimming. It's crazy what a 4-year-old girl can teach you. That little girl taught me probably more in the span of 3, 4 months than I learned in 7 years of school. It's insane.
Yeah, it's insane. I think one of my favorite things when I have a bunch of people on and we talk about their experiences or other people in their lives that have impacted them, I like get a little reminder and take away a piece from each thing.
Mhm.
And it's just either like lives that have been lost or just people that are still fighting. Like it's crazy because now I am recognizing those too, and then you share it with other people, and it's like every single day, others are getting reminders of just everything that's going on. It's so fun and amazing to have these type of conversations, and once again, I just think everything that you have done and endured is just so inspiring. How you have been able to mentally handle this and keep a positive attitude throughout is a fantastic story. I love to have these conversations because you're a prime example of your life doesn't stop and it's not over when you get diagnosed. You've taken a hard and terrible situation that happened to you and you've made so many amazing strides off of it and turned the bad into good. And I think that's a very hard thing for most people to do.
I always like to say, don't let your worst nightmare define you. Let it drive you. Let it fuel you. Let it inspire you to be a better version of yourself. And I know it's crazy that I let cancer kind of be my greatest fuel because a lot of people like to just bury that part of their life and don't really like to revisit. For instance, I have an uncle, grandmother, and a cousin who all had lymphoma. None were Burkitt, but all B cell type lymphoma. And like we talked about before, I'm not going to talk to my grandmother about it because I don't want her to get upset. My uncle was, I don't know how old he was when he was diagnosed, but again, different part of his life. My cousin, again, not a big fan of talking about it. So that's why I kind of wanted to be different and be a resource and an outlet to people that are going through because there isn't really a lot out there that kind of go through that experience, thankfully. For those that do have the want to speak up about it, like yourself, you should definitely give yourself a pat on the back because this isn't an easy topic to talk about because it was a really scary part of our lives that, God forbid, it ever does come back, then we'll have to fight again. But I definitely think, as you know, it fuels you knowing that you went through it, are here to share your story today and to hear stories like all the phenomenal people you've talked to. And I will say they've all been such inspiring stories. And I applaud all of them that willingly came forward, whether to share their story, a loved one they lost story, and all for that matter. Anyone out there going through their deepest, darkest nightmare, if there's one thing you could take away from this call, is just keep swimming because there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It may seem like that's miles and years away, but you will get there. You have to take it one day, one step at a time.
Amen.
Mm.
That is the end of our episode today of Combating Cancer. I want to thank Anthony once again for being on. I will make sure we link all of his socials down below. And as always, please share this story to someone that needs some extra encouragement. And if you or someone you know would love to come on and share their own personal story or have a sponsorship inquiry, please feel free to reach out to me. Well, that's all I have today. I hope we didn't talk your ears off too much, but I will chat with you guys again next Wednesday.